Christmas for me is a time of really good stories. I think Christmas really is a time of stories, isn't it? I mean, help me finish a couple of these. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. In those days, a decree went out for Emperor Augustus that everyone should be registered. And so all went to their own town, Joseph included, went from Nazareth to the city of David called Bethlehem. You're a mean one. You really are a heel. You're as cuddly as a cactus. You're as charming as an eel. Or our story from this year, I think there must be something wrong with me. Christmas is coming, but I'm not happy. There are these stories that we share from culture. There are the stories that we have from family traditions, like singing Silent Night and reading the story in Luke. We have laughs and favorite toys even. Can some of you remember your favorite toys from childhood? You have random new memories that pop up unexpectedly. Christmas is a time of stories, of joy, and of laughter, and of love. And our story for this week. Now then, the Magi had left, and an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Merry Christmas. When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated. And he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and younger, according to the time he had learned from the wise men. Happy holidays. The trees are still up for many of us. The decorations are still around. Some places even are still playing Christmas music. I can attest, there's still one radio station close to Springfield that is. Our presents are still new and fresh, just unwrapped this last week. The lights are still on, and here comes Matthew with his happy and upbeat story. Jesus has just been born. The wise men just came and visited using that famous star that gave the first Christmas gifts even. In my head, I imagine there are songs singing in the background. Well, maybe not, but in my head at least they're there. And here's Herod, the local despot, who's looking to wipe out Jesus at any cost, eating, perpetuating infanticide. Merry Christmas. This story is frankly brutal. It's rough. The Buddy the Elf side inside of me can't help but ask Matthew these questions. What the heck are you doing, Matthew? Why do you have to go and ruin a perfectly good thing like Christmas with your terrible story? This is anything but joyful and definitely not about the love that Jesus embodies when he's born. Why in the world, Matthew, is this story part of your Christmas story? Why not just get rid of it? Because it's to fulfill what has been spoken before. It's to fulfill what the prophets and the saints, the patriarchs and matriarchs spoke and lived out before. Think back with me to a couple of stories of Genesis and Exodus, specifically the stories of Joseph and Moses and the Israelite people. Let's start with Joseph, one of the patriarchs. He's ultimately the guy who saves Egypt and all of his people from this terrible famine, and he ultimately becomes Pharaoh's right-hand man, but his story starts like this. It's made clear in the story that he is his father's favorite son. But he has brothers. And so not surprisingly, his brothers get pretty jealous. Jealous enough to throw him in a well, to tear off his clothes, to sell him into slavery, and ultimately lie to their father about it. Joseph ends up in Egypt, where another person lies about him, and he ends up in jail. Merry Christmas. Or Moses, the big patriarch, if you will, of Genesis and Exodus. He's born in a time when Pharaoh was not too thrilled about the Israelite people. It says explicitly that he's terrified about the number and the power of the Hebrew people. And so, what does he do? He decides to enslave all of them, and then also ask for infanticide. He goes to the midwives, and eventually everyone, and says, if there are any Hebrew boys born, just kill them, get rid of them. this is how Moses' story starts too. He's born under a time of fear from a local despot and infanticide. Merry Christmas. Or maybe more appropriately, Blessed Passover. Or how about the Israelites? Moses is coming and tells them that they're going to be free from Pharaoh's oppressive power, and God makes it clear to them as well. But in order to get to freedom, they have to go through a number of plagues, from frogs and locusts to death of firstborns. And even when they escape from Egypt, they still have to flee the armies of Pharaoh. And even after they flee the armies of Pharaoh, they still have to go through the wilderness for at least a generation, arguing amongst each other, struggling with hunger and famine. And if they aren't struggling to literally survive, they're at each other's throats. Blessed Passover. Merry Christmas. Some of our stories of our greatest saints of history start with stories of death, destruction, deceit, and even jail. And what better way to start a holiday story? No, really. What better way to start a holiday story? A New Testament scholar, Melissa Bain Sevier, puts it this way. In every newborn child, maybe some of you parents can resonate with this, in every newborn child there's the promise of a future. Yet the hovering of danger, illness, and even fear is there. If this had not also been true for Jesus, then he would not have been one of us. If it had not been true for Joseph or for Moses, in other words, if there had been some uncertainty or even fear, then the miracle of Christmas, of God becoming human, of this Messiah coming, wouldn't be as powerful. That because of this uncertain and not so start, it makes the stories of Jesus later even more powerful. If Jesus can face Herod, can flee to Egypt and even survive, then maybe some of that can happen for us too. Maybe God can really change things. That if Joseph can survive wells and enslavement, jail, and lying, and become the savior figure of his family, then maybe God can save us too. That if Moses can somehow get adopted by Pharaoh while Pharaoh is killing every other Hebrew child, and even stand up to Pharaoh in the end, then maybe God can cause freedom and justice for us too. This Matthew story, though on the surface looks like a terrible Christmas story, is actually meant to set the ground for what Jesus will do later in the story. It's brutal, don't get me wrong, but so is life sometimes. So is humanity sometimes. This story is not happy-go-lucky in any way, shape, or form, but it is joyful. It is joyful. This story celebrates the reason for the season, the saving and delivering power of Christ that fulfills what has been spoken through Joseph and Moses and the Israelite people. It fulfills all of those stories. It's a story that celebrates that our Messiah, our liberator, was born. Born with angels singing and magi visiting, and then he had to flee, and was a refugee and came back safely to do God's work. That there's fear and uncertainty and joy and happiness, and in the end, all of that was overcome to provide us with our Savior. And so that story, this truly Christmas story, is why we have Go Therefore Sunday. Because we're joining in the Christmas work of providing hope and liberation, even in the midst of fear and uncertainty. And we do this work of supporting our wider community to hopefully provide some sense of liberation. It's worship, it's Christmas in action form. And so we do these Fifth Sundays, these Go Therefore Sundays, because it's the story of Matthew lived out. It's following in the footsteps of Jesus and his parents. And so today, as we go, church, I invite you to carry with you this story of Jesus, who was born, frankly, in a little bit of a scary situation, who had to flee and wait and finally return. As you go, let's remember the uncertainty and also the hope. That ultimately we are sure that God, born just a few days ago, will deliver us, all of us, from whatever it is that's holding us down. That today, God has sent a Messiah, a liberator, to bring justice and wholeness for all of us. Let's bring that message with us.